Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's Inspiring Leadership podcast. This week's guest is very interesting. We're having a conversation with him in Brussels, but he spent much of his life in Slovakia, and he has set up a fascinating organization which is involved in global and European security. He's been meeting with some fascinating people, from Zelensky to Ursula von der Leyen and also to Macron. So without further ado, I'll let him introduce himself.
Hello, thank you for the invitation. My name is Róbert Vass, and I'm the founder and president of GLOBSEC, which is a leading think tank and non-governmental organization in Central Europe, dealing with international and geopolitical security issues. And with that, I would like to hand back to Jonathan Bowman-Perks.
Thank you very much indeed, Robert. Well, Robert, it's been a fascinating time with what's been going on with European security. And in a moment, we can be talking about the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We can talk about the expansion of NATO, how the European Union has grown, how global security is probably at its most threatening that it has been in my lifetime. And I'm 60 years old. I grew up, born just 15 years after the end of the Second World War. And now I think it's the most dangerous time I've known it, having been an army officer serving on the East-West German front and working in electronic warfare. I saw a lot of what was going on the other side, what the Russians were up to and the East Germans. But let's begin with inspiring leadership, since the series is about inspiring leadership. For you, Robert, what does inspiring leadership mean? And when you meet somebody who you'd describe as an inspiring leader, what qualities do you admire about them?
For me, an inspiring leader is a leader that inspires me in doing something not for my own or for money, but for a bigger good, something that is bigger than you and that you want to do because of a good cause. And I met a lot of inspiring leaders who inspire me to do things which are not for your own good. So that's for me the inspiring leadership.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. They've got to be bigger than the selfish myself, all about me. And we have in Europe and around the world at the moment quite a lot of what they call strongman leaders, but it's all about them and how long they can stay in power, rather than doing things for the good of the community or society or the global community. So we need it more than ever. I think inspired leadership is more important than ever. Our life journey defines our leadership. And I'm just interested, Robert, how have you reframed your life experiences and the individuals that you've met to shape the leader that you are today as president of GLOBSEC?
So my life story begins really when I was a teenager. I'm coming from a very complicated region, Central Europe. In 1989, we had the Velvet Revolution, and we've been building up our young democracy. I'm from a young country, which has only over 30 years. And what shaped my career and my personality was the endeavor what our country wanted to become part of the West, part of European Union, part of NATO, part of the civilized world. And with all the struggles we went through of building this, with all the difficulties we've been going through, this is something that shaped me and shaped my willingness to join diplomatic career or studying international relations, and do something that can be impactful and change the course of the history. Because I lived the history. Actually, I was 6 years old when the Velvet Revolution went on, and I've seen how the old generation of activists, politicians, and leaders have been building Europe whole, free, and at peace. And it was about leadership. It was about individual courage and leaders that we are now part of the EU. We are now part of the West. And I think this is a tremendous history that we've been going through. And we've seen a huge dynamism in politics, in security, in international relations. And often in history, Central Europe, that I come from, Bratislava, Slovakia, a small country of 5 million people, in the past has been just an object of the bigger entities, just an object. And what we try to do is that how can we become from an object to a subject of international relations?
Yeah, well, it's very interesting. And in my limited understanding of the history of your country, I was always fascinated what happened in the late 1930s, where Hitler, was trying to take a chunk of Czechoslovakia, as it was at the time, and the Sudetenland. And we all weakened as European leaders, didn't lead at all, and just appeased him and gave him the chunk which had all the fortifications protecting Czechoslovakia. So as soon as he'd got the Sudetenland, he could then take the Czech bit and Slovakia. We did you a great disservice then. I hope we don't do now, particularly as we're dealing with another Hitler-like character, with Putin throwing his weight around, taking the Crimea, taking the Donbass region, and having a security operation, otherwise known as an invasion. Surely that's probably the biggest kind of threat going on for Europe in your lifetime, and certainly in mine. What do you think about that situation?
Absolutely, and you made a very a good historic parallel, because this is exactly what happened in the 30s, when politicians thought that they could appease Hitler by doing compromises. And I remember Chamberlain saying, why should we care about this small country far away and of the people that we don't know much about? So let's just strike kind of a deal that would prevent a second World War. But we've seen that if an aggressor gets what he wants, he doesn't stop there. He goes
Correct.
further.
Yeah.
So this reminds me very much of what's going on in Ukraine, because the war that's going on there by Vladimir Putin is not only against a sovereign country, it is against the very principles of international peace and principles of international order, where a small country or a big country, no matter whether you are small or big, can decide democratically about your leadership and where do you want to belong. But today, somebody says, like Vladimir Putin, to its neighbor, you don't have this right because I decide on your behalf where should you belong. If we compromise in these principles of international order, we will be doomed as the West. And I think that the future of the West is now being decided in Eastern Europe. So how we perform in defense of our basic principles and in defense of our basic values will define the credibility of our life of international relations and of the West and our institutions as such.
I think you're so right. And I was very disappointed. I think it's probably because he's in his 90s and not quite as wise, to hear Henry Kissinger going, oh, well, just let Russia have what it's accumulated so far, Crimea, a bit of the Donbass, that'll keep them happy. I mean, has he learned nothing? And this is where you had a good address at your recent Globesec conference that you had, where you had some great world leaders and European leaders coming, where Zelensky himself spoke to you, and he just crushed that one, because he goes, no, you start giving in to this, they're going to just keep eating more and more and more. Bullies just love to get their own way. How was the conference, by the way? You met some fascinating, but tell us some of the famous names that we would have heard about that you had at your conference or at other conferences you had in the last year or two.
So let me first react on what you said, because you're very right. Because this war didn't start this year. It's going on for several years already. Don't forget Crimea in 2014, and Donbass and Luhansk. The problem was that it was too cheap for Putin. I mean, we didn't react. We gave him signals that this is a gray zone and we are not ready to do anything. So we just scratched with sanctions. So he came to a conclusion where he miscalculated that the West again would do nothing simply. And I think this was a huge miscalculation. But you asked about the conference. Exactly a week ago, we finished, or just a few days ago, with our 17th years of international GLOBSEC forum, where we gathered more than 1,500 leaders from more than 80 countries of the world. And that would include more than 30 foreign delegations on the prime ministers, presidents levels, foreign ministers. We had so many inspiring leaders in Bratislava. We had the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, President Zelensky speaking online, half of the Ukrainian government. We had foreign minister of India, Jai Shankar, several ministers of defense, and many, many other business leaders who came to Bratislava to discuss about how we can make a world a better place, a more safer place, how we can build our own resilience in the face of this naked aggression in our neighborhood, and how we can mobilize resources to help Ukraine to defend itself and to defend the values they are defending right now. So I think it was very strong. There was a very strong message that the West is united, and we need to keep it like that for the future. And there was a clear message that we cannot compromise an inch on the principles of the international order.
Yeah, no, you're so right. And Xi Jinping in China, another strong man who's throwing his weight around. You've got Turkey with Erdogan and various other leaders who think that if we give in on this one, how about China invading Taiwan? And a lot hangs on how we deal with this one, and it will be interesting to see how long people keep an interest in supporting the Ukraine with weapons and equipment. I see Germany weakening a bit. They were going to give some armor to Poland, and Poland was going to give their armor to Ukraine, but they haven't yet done that. And so we need people to hold their nerve, and this is going to take a long time. This war will not be over quickly, and I don't know how it's going to end. Do you have a prediction on how you think it's going to end?
So this is not just a local war. This is a transformational war, and the biggest war for decades in the European continent, and I would say the biggest since the Second World War. And it's brutal, with a very horrific face. I was in Ukraine several weeks ago, where I led a mission, an international delegation to Kiev of parliamentarians from different European countries. We organized it as GLOBSEC, not only just to see with our own eyes the destruction on the outskirts of Kiev, but also to show support to Ukrainians and to discuss how Europe could better assist to Ukraine. But I have to tell you that we've seen in the media all these destructed houses, buildings, schools. But when you see it with your own eyes, you simply can't believe that history in the 21st century is coming back, and with such a horrific face. And it is clear that the war was not and is not fought against military targets, but against civilian targets. This is insane, and this is something which those who are responsible will need to be hold account. But we are seeing that these people are on the front lines of democracy, are on the front lines of the value-based world. They are defending them, and we have the moral obligation to not to leave them alone, to give them a hope that they are part of Europe, and we count on them in Europe. And this is very important.
You are so right. And it's a calculated policy, clearly by Putin, to target, for example, destroying all the cranes and the port facilities around Ukraine, so they can't export their grain, and all the blockade of the Ukrainian coast and the destruction of all the factories and things. So they're laying waste to the infrastructure of a whole country, which not only affects Ukraine, But the World Health Organization said much of the poorer countries rely on grain from Ukraine to survive. So Russia's causing famine in some of the most poor and needy countries around the world. And as you say, they've deliberately, and there's a number of cases already, targeted civilians, killing civilians deliberately, and their houses and their blocks of flats. It's not an accident where some missiles destroy a hospital or whatever. One might be an accident, but when you find there's a consistency of all the hospitals they've been firing missiles into them, it's definitely this campaign. So that in itself is much more we can talk about. But I'd like to bring this back to yourself, Robert. As you grew up, the Velvet Revolution and your experience, what about your parents and your grandparents? You know, what professions did they have? What values did your mother and father bring you up with as a young lad before the age of 6 when you went through the Velvet Revolution?
I'm coming from a family which is in healthcare. So my father is a pharmacist, my brother is a pharmacist, my mother is dentist. I'm the only one in the family who decided to go a very different route in international relations and diplomacy. And that was exactly because of the changes that our country was going through, and it struck me such a huge interest that I decided I want to be part, and I want to help. I want to be part of this historic moment and to help a little bit.
Yeah.
But you know, all the values of being resilient and building your dreams are coming from the family and from my parents. So I'm very grateful for them for you know bringing in the key values that I'm building on now.
Yes. Well, you know, professionals like dentists and pharmacists have to be very persistent and stick at things because it's tough for what they do. And indeed, in this country, dentists have the highest rates of suicide because it's actually quite tough being a dentist. You're constantly dealing with people's mouths and things don't quite work out as you want. And it's tough, tougher than people realize. Thinking about your whole life, you're 39 now, but what was the happiest or the proudest moment? And then also what was the darkest moment of your life, personally or professionally? And what did you learn from both those happiest moments and your darkest moments?
So I would say the happiest moment was when my son was born. I have a 5-year-old son, and you know, since then, you know, you have another reason or additional reason why you want to do or make the world a better place, and you want to do it. I'm also very proud when we achieve something with GLOBSEC and we are getting international feedback, whether it's from media or political or business leaders, and they say that they want to come back to our conference or forum, and they want us to organize it and to help them, brief them. This is something which tells me that the work or the job we are doing has some impact. So that makes me happy. The darkest moment, I would say, was during the COVID time, when we needed to cut our staff and we went into serious troubles when it comes to financing and trying to survive this time, and it was really difficult. But we've been able to go through it, and we took it as an opportunity to get out from the crisis stronger. So one thing that I've learned in this crisis is that you never come out of the crisis the same. You either walk out weakened or strengthened. And it's about the transformation, or how you transform the crisis into an opportunity. And that's the key thing. Actually, we had the Pope Francis speaking at our conference last year, and these were his very strong words, where he said, "Let's take the global pandemic as an opportunity to build a world better, to learn from our mistakes, and to make sure that we all come out stronger. Well, I'm not sure that we are there yet, but actually there is a big truth in his words.
I think there is, and there's many who look at the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the pandemic, and the impact on supply lines and people trying to do things in-house themselves, and they go, you know, the global dream is over, that everybody's now becoming nationalistic and selfish and looking after their own country, and it isn't. But people just see it in a short slice of history, and they don't realize that this is a longer term. Let's come back to you've got a 5-year-old. It will not be very long, 11 years, and he'll suddenly be 16, which is quite a key turning point in life. What bit of advice, if you travel back in time to see the young Róbert Vass, what bit of advice would you give to yourself at that age, which is quite influential, knowing what you know now from meeting people like Pope Francis and political leaders, prime ministers, presidents? What's important? What's not important? What would be your words of wisdom to yourself?
I would say two things. First, I would say, don't waste your time with negative people or those people who are telling you that you can't do something. Surround yourself with people who are better than you, who are inspiring even you, because that moves you further. And because if you invest time into people who suck out your energy, you don't have time to be constructive and to build something. And the second thing I would say is never do it alone. Even though you have the resilience, you have great ambitions, you will never be strong enough alone. You need to be able to build around yourself a wall of leaders like you, who believe you and you can trust them, who will be helping you in difficult times, because these times will come. And then you need good friends, and you need the good people who will support you. So I think these two things are the key two things that I've learned in 17 years that I'm building an organization as GLOBSEC. Yeah.
No, you've done a lot to build that one, and particularly getting through the pandemic. It hit me very hard. I had an 80% drop in my revenues during the pandemic, and building it back has been a tough one. It's working, but it's just, I think it's tough for many businesses. It's had a huge impact on us. What we have in life, crucible moments. The pandemic was one of them. Personal events that happened to us. Those crucible moments shape us, as you say, like Pope Francis said, you know, can we come out better from it? Can we frame it in a way that we've learned something from it rather than seeing ourselves as victims? But we all have regrets. If you had a regret, what's your biggest regret in life?
Difficult question. And I could talk about failures a lot, because everything that you learn, or the biggest lessons that you learn, are around failures. And it's not just like it's not just a cliche. It's actually truth. And also people who tell you honestly, a negative feedback is also very important, because often those people who are honest with you and who don't just praise you, but who give you honest feedback, these people tend to stay in your life longer than just those who are praising you. But one thing I would do differently is that when my son was born, we told to ourselves with my wife that our life will not change, will go on. But the impact was that my life didn't change so much, but her life changed a lot, because I traveled a lot. And this is something that I would simply do differently, a better balance during the first and second year of my son, because I was just too much away on business trips and elsewhere. So if there's somebody who's listening to this, I give this very strong advice, which goes from my own experience.
Yeah, and I think that's so true. And I'm now a grandfather to two. I've got 4 children of my own, and seeing my my stepson with his 2 young children, they're only about a year between them both. It is very draining on him and on his wife. And if men think they can just leave it to the woman to sort things out, they get it badly wrong. Everything changes. Once you have a child, everything changes. And exactly. In some ways, they say that nature has given us this ability to forget, for the woman to forget the pain of birth, and for the man to forget how difficult it was. So they'll have another one. Otherwise, the human race would suddenly be extinct if we knew what it was really going to be like. Mm-hmm. Let's then, thank you for that, about your biggest regret in life of being perhaps a better father and being more present at the birth of your child. And I know that having been an army officer when my children were growing up, but I was pleased to be there at the birth of both my children. But I think in my own case, I was away on tour in Northern Ireland when the children were so very young, and I needed to come back. I had to come back to help out because it was just too much for my ex-wife. And I wish I'd been there to help them all, but you're sent away on 6-month tours to fight terrorism and things like this, and I had to do that. We'll go around the Inspiring Leadership Compass. This is based, Robert, on our research into what makes inspiring men, inspiring women, and inspiring teams. And the first one is MQ, moral quotient, your integrity, your values, your beliefs. What's your true north that makes you authentic? And what's happened when you've not lived according to your values? I, for example, think of a number of occasions in my time when I didn't stick to my values. I let them slip, and I'm embarrassed about that. I'm not proud of those moments, and I had to haul myself back and learn the harsh lesson of not sticking to my integrity and behaving in a way that I espoused and said was the way to behave. I hadn't done that myself. What about you? What are your values, and what have you learned when you let it slip, and how did you bring yourself back to true north?
So first of all, I strongly believe in the values of democracy and values of free world. This is, I mean, one of the key points that drives me further. But when it comes to the principles I'm following, it has been always a can-do approach. I always came from a situation where 9 people told me it is impossible. Don't do it. It's just too much energy, etc. Even the 10th people told me the same. We always found a solution, or we always found a way how to get things done. So this is one of my strongest principles that I'm trying to do in my organization. The second is that don't wait for opportunity. Rather create it yourself, because somebody needs to create these opportunities. And if you want to shape the world around you, you need to be active. You don't wait for others to shape it or to fix it for you, but you can fix it and you can create these opportunities. And the third is that never be satisfied with average. The ambition is to be excellent. The ambition is to be better and to prove that you can do it. I would say these are the basic things that are defining me.
Yeah, I really relate to that one, particularly the don't be average. And I remember when, having been given outstanding reports throughout my army career as a young British Army officer, I then went to the Top Gun school, as they called it, which was the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst, to be an instructor myself, to train the next generation of leaders. And I was given an average report. And I thought, I don't do average. I've never been average. What do you mean? But the other guys were much better than me. And I had to raise my game. It was a crucible moment for me. It was a crisis. And that's when I reached out to find out about people who'd known my father, who was killed when I was 2.5. He was a Top Gun. He was a pilot who was killed like Goose in that first Top Gun film. And I learned from them about learning from leaders like you and passing it on to other people, learning from you. But my question to you as well was, what have you done when you let your values slip? How did you bring yourself back, Robert? Just in one sentence or two, give us an example on how you brought yourself back when you didn't stick to the espoused values.
Often, as a leader, you often need to inspire the team you have. But you're right that sometimes you need these inspiring leaders for yourself, because many times you're out of energy, or you're burning out, or you think you made so many mistakes that whether it's worth to continue. And in those cases, people or leaders who are on the top find themselves alone, and they cannot show it to the team. Many times they need to show the persistence. But actually, what helped me at that time are good friends outside, and other inspiring leaders who helped me to go through the difficulties and the mistakes you've done, and to get a different perspective on them.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I would challenge you to say that from my experience and the CEOs that I work with around the world, only the strong can be vulnerable. And part of the problem with the likes of people like Trump and, Erdogan and Boris Johnson is they try and put on this strong front, and people know that actually that's not the case. So I would encourage you, when you're having a challenge and you're finding your energy is low, they can see it, you can see it. So who are you kidding? So actually, I would say at those moments, just say, guys, I'm a bit low on energy at the moment, or I'm finding this a bit tough. We will get through this, but just bear with me, because they can see it and then they'll relate to you. Let's move from MQ, your moral quotient, to PQ. What gives your life meaning, purpose? For 17 years, you've set up GLOBSEC and you've been the president of it. It's your baby. What is your calling and your vocation? Why do you do this? Why, Robert?
So one of the reasons why we started all of this was to make an international impact. Often, so again, I'm coming from a small country, 5 million. It's one city in the US, or even a small city in India or somewhere else. And often there was a brain drain in our country, and there was often an idea that if you want to do something big, or you change the world, or have an impact, you have to go to US, you have to go to big cities, to London, elsewhere. Now, I strongly disagreed with that. And also with our friends with whom we established GLOBSEC, because we strongly believe that even from a small country or a small city, you can do things that have international impact, and that the ambition of the country is not defined by how big it is, but how strong ideas you can simply produce, and that can be realized internationally. And it's about those ideas, those projects, those strong leaders who then can give even a small country a big voice.
Yeah, I like that. It's not about the size of the country, it's the strengths of your beliefs and the strengths of your ideas. I do like that. From MQ to PQ to health quotient, your brain health and your physical health. Now, Robert, I can only guess by looking at you, you look healthy, but I don't know. What do you do to look after your brain health? And what do you do to look after your physical health? And what works for you that you would pass on tips to people listening?
So definitely, you need mental hygiene. You need to get out of your bubble often. The worst thing with leaders is that when they close down themselves in bubbles and they live there. So what I do is I sport a lot. I ski, I hike, and I like to travel. I like to learn new cultures, new places. That's something that I like most. And this is bringing me out of the bubble. This is helping me, to do the mental hygiene. So a combination of sports and getting to know new places in the world.
Brilliant. And what about physical?
Well, exercising is physical.
A regime every? I mean, you do the sport and you do the hiking, and
I do gym.
Ski.
I do gym.
Do you do press ups each morning or something like
that? I would say 3 to 4 times a week. Yeah, I do gym. That's something that I have a part of the routine.
Yeah, that's good. And what about, do you do intermittent fasting, 16 hours of fasting, 8 hours of eating? Do you do healthy eating? What are you studying what makes your body healthy, the microbiome and glucose and things like that, and avoiding sugar and refined carbs?
I would say I have times when I do it, when I do low carbs, but then I have simply very stressful moments when I simply can't do it. So this is kind of this is not so consistent as I would like it to be.
Yeah, well, it's work in progress for all of us. It's I found that since I've studied it so much more, I've read about 20 or 30 books on the topic. It's so key to our performance day to day, but also to die young at a ripe old age, rather than to get ill long time before you eventually die. So let's look after our health and well-being. Hey, Robert. The next one is EQ, emotional and social intelligence. I mean, goodness, there's you're having to get a whole load of people, influence them, get countries and politicians to agree to come to the 17 forums that you've done. And you want to make it so it's not just a talking shop, but actually some action comes from it. What are they going to do? Learning and action. So what would be your top tip in building skills in rapport, listening, influencing people?
So first of all, I was learning by practice. I started very young. I was around 20 years old when I started with this job. And I have to say that this was a learning in progress. It's constant learning for 17 years. And if you have 80 nationalities coming to your forum, you find out that and everybody thinks and everybody is important. Some of them have very important people, high egos, and to deal with all these people, it's extremely difficult. You need to be able to develop skills where you make simply everybody happy and everybody goes from the forum that you create happy. So really this is about learning by practice and learning what people really what makes them happy.
But learning by practice is very interesting if you've got some good role models, some good mentors, some good coaches. Have you ever had a mentor? Have you had any coaching yourself from a leadership coach?
I didn't have a training or a coaching from a leadership coach, but I would say I had a coach in my organization, somebody who inspires me, and that was a coach itself. That was one of our ambassadors who and a very early stage of building up the organization. He believed in me. He believed in us. I brought him in as the chairman of the board. This was a diplomat, former Slovak ambassador to United States, ambassador to Hungary, Czech Republic. Now, somebody who made so much to put our country back on track when it comes to EU and NATO. And he's a value-based leader, and that's something which helped me to learn how to deal with people, how to build relationships, and how to turn these relationships into constructive agendas. How you can turn the relationship into building something, some political and international impact. So I was happy to have these people around.
Yeah, that you're very lucky to have had someone who's been an ambassador and to America and different countries like that, which actually touches on to the next point of around the Inspired Leadership Compass CQ, which is collaborative, cognitive, and cultural intelligence. How have you developed your cultural intelligence and your ability to get on with people who are very different to you and from a variety of different social backgrounds, and to recognize diversity, equality, and inclusion? What's your top tip for getting on well with people who are very different from you?
So again, it's something which is in my DNA, because again, coming from the region, which is multinational, which in the history, and I come from a city which has been part of so many different countries. My grandma told me that she didn't move from the city, but she was living in 4 or 5 different countries because the borders has been constantly changing. And also the family that I come from is bilingual and part of it trilingual, so German, Slovak, and Hungarian. And when you learn, when you have these languages from the very childhood, it helps you to think in different structures. Because if you learn in one language, you think in one structure. But if you learn these languages from your childhood, the structures that you think in are very different, and it helps you to develop critical thinking, but also empathy towards somebody who has a completely different background.
Yeah.
So I think this is very, very, very strong observation that I had.
Yeah, so true. Which takes us on nicely from that empathy and cultural thinking and the diverse thinking to a topic that you've talked about quite a bit. It's obviously a key essence of you, Robert, which is RQ, resilience against adversity. How have you picked yourself up in times of adversity, like when the pandemic had to make you close down a lot of Globesec and lay a number of people off because you're in the middle of a pandemic? And you said your parents have helped give you some resilience, but what's your top tip about resilience in adverse conditions?
I would say the biggest factor in the resilience we've built is the belief in the cause. Because if the belief and the passion for the cause or for the mission that you have is not deep enough, then you would just give up. So I think that the number one in building resilient teams is to make sure that they understand that in difficult times, that they can go through very difficult times, but it is worth, not for money, but for the impact and the mission they are doing. So I think it's really the deep belief in the mission and the passion to realize it.
Beautifully put. I am so in accord with that. Obviously, with my military background, when we were doing work, for example, in Bosnia, to keep the peace after the Dayton Peace Accord, the company I had of 140 soldiers and 14 tanks, we knew our mission was critical to Europe's peace and security. And it gave us a real sense of purpose and resilience to overcome various problems we had, such as Serbian generals who decided to try and break the rules, and we had to try and close things down before it broke out into conflict again. So I really like that belief in a cause, a passion, and a mission must be deep to stop you giving up. Thank you for that, Robert. Love it. Brand quotient, BQ, is the penultimate one. As you grow, you've got this ambassador who was a good coach to you, but have you yet had 360-degree feedback from about 20 people who are in your organization and outside your organization to understand how others see you as a leader and what you can do to improve? And if you haven't yet done it, when are you going to do
it? I think we've done this in the past, only once, but I think this is a very, very good exercise that needs to be done on a regular basis. It doesn't mean we are not doing feedbacks. We do the feedbacks, and I think quick and constant feedback is the most important. But 360 is something that I remember when we've done it was very useful in learning, in getting the right feedback from people who surround you or with whom you work. So definitely yes. But on the feedback on me, basically that's what you ask, is to some extent that I'm very demanding. So it means that sometimes I'm running too fast and the rest is not able to run as fast. So I and other leaders need to be also, take into consideration that you can transform and do things as fast as your team is able to do it, because you cannot be disconnected from the rest. Because if you disconnect yourself, then you create real trouble. So this is something which that needs a lot of discussions and coordination internally, and detailed oriented, and I would say out of box thinking.
Yeah. So it's good to have your out of box thinking. It's good that you have that real passion and drive, and you must remember to bring people with you, and at a pace that is sustainable. Because we're not on a sprint; we're on a triathlon. Particularly with the pandemic, and people are quite exhausted by it all. So you have to pace it so it's sustainable. Good point. Legacy is the 8th of the Inspiring Leadership components. What would you like your legacy to be in your work and in your personal life? In a sentence for each, Robert.
So in the brand or at GLOBSEC at work, I would like the legacy to be a sustainable organization that would outlive me, that would outlive my person and our team, that would be stronger than us. That would be my legacy. With that connected, that I would be happy if the forum and the organization is well recognized internationally, and that the city of Bratislava is firmly put, similarly as Davos, as a place to go when it comes to international discussions for us. And when it comes to personal life, the biggest achievement you can get, of course, in personal life are your children. Making sure they are successful, they are value based, and they know they have the moral compass in life that will help them to guide through difficult times, and that they will know that this compass will guide them when it is needed.
That's a good one. I think this idea of, and I'm very lucky with 4 children, 2 of my own and 2 of my wife's, that they're now launched age 26 to 30. And I'm proudest of them that they're happy, they're balanced, they've got partners in their lives, they're doing worthwhile work that they find fulfilling and makes a difference in the world, and they're in good health. and they have a strong set of values, as you say. I think that's well put. Executive teams next, after inspiring leadership. What have you done, Robert? 17 years of the forum. You started young when you were 20, in your 20s. When you've had teams in the past that went a little bit toxic, or an individual went a bit toxic, or didn't really add value, what have you done to turn the team around and make it high performing? What was your action that you took?
So what I've learned during the building up GLOBSEC and the leadership is that the first thing you need to do is to get the right people on the board. People with whom you can build and then discuss the strategy. You can't build a strategy on your own and get other people just to passively agree on it. So if you want to build a high-performing team, it's very important that you create the dynamism inside and the trust, where collectively you can pull the organization or a specific project further. We had quite a big, changes in the team. Basically, part of the reasons was a very huge dynamism and a too fast run. So it was like a sprint, but then it turned out to be a marathon with high pace, which then makes people say that this is not sustainable for a long term. That's why I was saying the previous point. But there were times where we had internally toxic people. And there were times when these toxic people created an unbearable toxicity internally that downgrades the organizational culture, that downgrades the values like can-do approach, etc. And those times, so I learned that you need to get rid very quickly of these people. If you cannot turn them around, then you cannot let them to change your organization. Second point is that if you build a strong, resilient organization, then the culture of the organization itself would expel these people, so they would drop out quicker, and you don't have to do it. So if you build the right culture, then the culture of the organization does it itself, and you don't have to do it. But then if it grows bigger, then simply we needed to cut several departments, etc. Made real big changes. So bring on the right people and make sure quickly that these people are part of the culture, and if not, then
help them find
maybe
that.
other organizations.
Help them find their happiness elsewhere, because it might be they're great people, it's just not the right fit for you, and there has to be the right fit with the culture, and the culture has to be healthy, that brings people on, develops them, encourages them. But if they have gone toxic, you've got to act quickly, otherwise it makes the whole team starts getting toxic. Great a bit of advice, thank you. My penultimate question is books on leadership. What's been a favorite book on leadership that you've read recently that you recommend others listening around the world have a read of the book, or listen to an audio book or a podcast? What would you recommend?
So on this, I have a very clear view, because the best book on leadership I read was from Jim Collins, Good to Great. And he has written several books, Great by Choice and many others, but I'm a big fan of the book about the fifth grade leadership, and a quite interesting analysis what distinguishes the great companies from just good companies, average companies and average organizations. What is the difference, and how they've done it? So I recommend Good to Great from Jim Collins.
Yeah, and level 5 leadership is essentially inspiring leadership. People who have humility, a bit of humanity, a bit of humor, but they don't have to be big, loud people. They don't have to be extroverts. They can actually, many of them are introverts, quite thoughtful, reflective types, but they have high levels of emotional and social intelligence. They can bring the best out of other people, and they have that purpose and that mission. So love that one. It's a favorite of mine too. Okay, Robert, this is great. Perfect timing. We're now coming to the final piece, which is your 2-minute top tip. So Robert, would you kindly introduce yourself, the role you do, what your organization does, and share with us your top leadership tip?
My name is Róbert Vass. I'm leading a think tank international organization, GLOBSEC, which is a non-governmental organization, dealing with international security, geopolitics. We are trying to make a world better by putting together right people at the right place at the right time, but also by creating policy recommendations and trying to see beyond the horizon. The tip for leadership that I've learned in these 17 years is never give up. It sounds like cliche. It sounds like cliche because many people are saying it, never give up, you can do it. But actually, if you want to build an organization, you need to be persistent. You need to be consistent and need to believe in the cause you are doing, because there will be a lot of problems, a lot of things that will prevent you or will want to prevent you to succeed. And maybe you make one mistake, 2 mistakes, 3 mistakes. But if you don't give up, at the end, people will trust you that you will do everything possible to achieve the mission you are striving to achieve. And if people will believe that you are putting all your energy into that, they will start to follow you and they will start to do the same. Because you cannot expect it from other organizations and other partners to do it if you don't do it and you give up at the first or the second problem.
Thank you very much indeed, Robert Vass. That was a really enjoyable conversation. And I also appreciate all that you're doing to try and look after the security, the cooperation, the sustainability of Europe at this crucial time with the Russian invasion of the Ukraine, with the results of the pandemic, the expansion of Europe, the expansion of NATO. We need security and we need the work that you're doing. So thank you for all you do for us all.
Thank you very much. And it was a great pleasure to be part of this Inspiring Leadership podcast.
Thanks, Robert.